And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in Culver City.
John, today was a very special day at the LA City Council meeting as Eunices Hernandez invited several groups of elementary school students to watch how government is done.
While you're getting what's next, I want to go to Councilmember Hernandez. I think she's got some friends here in yellow hats that she wants to introduce us to.
Thank you, Council President. Can I have the students and staff of Chatsworth Park Urban Planning Magnet stand up? Superior Elementary and STEM Prep Elementary, please stand up. Thank you.
And she gave them some love, and so did Imelda.
Well, I just want to thank Councilmember Hernandez for honoring these young leaders. I think it's been a long time since we've had folks from the elementary age here in council. So just know that we're excited to see you guys. Hope you guys enjoy seeing the building.
And John, what do you think those elementary school students saw when they were at LA City Hall?
I have an idea.
Items and non-agenda public comment.
Go ahead.
Communist.
Reminds me of when it was Jillian Barbary Day in Los Angeles, and we got an earful of that, too.
That's that same guy.
He has a lot to say.
Items and non-agenda public comment.
Go ahead.
Communist.
Well, the kids got quite an education today.
Well, they learned a lot of letters of the alphabet. Just in that alone, they learned M, they learned F, they learned C, they learned S, and they learned F.
I wonder how quickly they ushered those kids out of the room.
If you have a child that's in elementary school and they ever bring a permission slip home that says their school wants to do a field trip to LA City Hall, you know what you're in for.
Items and non-agenda public comment.
Go ahead.
Communist.
Well, if you do that, none of those kids are going to end up getting political science degrees. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Over the weekend, we had some news that broke about the upcoming gubernatorial election. We know that California Governor Gavin Newsom is barred from running for re-election due to voter-imposed term limits. That means the seat is open, and California will have a new governor. We will choose a new governor in November of 2026. We know that there are many declared candidates for this office already, including the state's lieutenant governor, Eleni Konalakis, the state superintendent of public instruction, Tony Thurmond, the other Tony Atkins, the former president pro tem of the Senate, and then we have the third Tony, Antonio Villaraigosa. But now, Randy, we have a Republican that is officially running for governor.
Riverside Sheriff Chad Bianco officially announced that he is running for governor in 2026, and his first interview after announcing he was running for governor was with our buddy Fox 11's Marla Tejas.
I'm here to announce our campaign to be the next governor of California.
Developing news, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco is running for governor in 2026. He announced his campaign today in Riverside, becoming the first major Republican in the race. The Law and Order conservative says his campaign will focus on uniting Californians around a shared goal of improving the state rather than deepening political divides. Riverside County.
And he got a little of statewide attention last year because he was campaigning up and down the state for Prop 36, which passed by the widest margins we have seen for any ballot measure in a very long time.
I think he is the only one who is officially declared for governor who endorsed 36. I know that Villaraigosa made comments that were supportive of 36 and comments that suggested that 36 went too far. I don't know how he actually voted on 36, although I'm sure he'd tell us today that he voted for it after seeing the results. But Chad Bianco was the only one, again, declared as of today, who was out there campaigning on behalf of Prop 36.
Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, he made the trip up to 60, and here he is live in our studio tonight. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh, boy. I just feel for the guy. I mean, it was a holiday, so there's not as much traffic, but driving from Riverside to West L.A., woo!
You better use Waze.
To 60, and here he is live in our studio tonight. Thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
All right. We knew that this was coming. You've been hinting at this for a long time. Why are you running for California governor?
Yeah, it's plain and simple. California is broken. We are failing, and we are failing our residents, our Californians. And it's not our Californians' fault.
Let's just do an accent comparison. Are you ready?
Okay.
Residents, our Californians.
For Californians.
Can you deal with 4 years of that?
Residents, our Californians.
For Californians.
That debate stage is going to be hot.
Well, just imagine if Katie Porter's up there, too.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Please. Residents, our Californians. And it's not our Californians' fault. It's not the people's fault. It's government's fault. Government has forgotten about Californians in favor of special interests and lobbyists. And
well, many of those lobbyists were members of the assembly.
That's true. That's how they got their start.
When they term out, they go into the private sector, which is bribing the public sector.
And we see it every single day, whether it's homeless, whether it's regulation for builders, whether it's fires. You can't go outside without seeing another failure of government, and no one is addressing it. It's just a repeat year after year after year. And as we come into another political cycle, we're hearing the same promises of fixing the same things that they're causing. And honestly,
how many years are we into Gavin Newsom's 10-year homeless plan?
Well, he started that before he was governor of California. He started that back in San Francisco, right?
In 2004, when he was mayor of San Francisco, he promised to end homelessness in 10 years in that city.
How's that working out?
It's not.
And honestly, I just got tired of it. You can only take so much of the same thing. And in my work it's all about honesty. Law enforcement is about you do not lie. And when we are told things that we know are physically not true, it's hard to take, and I just can't do it.
One of the things you talked about, because I was there during your announcement today, was you're tired of seeing family members, friends, whomever move out of state.
Yes.
That's a big tenet of your campaign.
Yes.
How do you keep people from moving out of state?
No, that's going to be tough.
Let's go back to the point he just made about the lies that come from Sacramento. And it's really true. Go back to a subject we talked about last week, the bullet train. Gavin had a press conference to talk about what a great success the bullet train was. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
In what world can anyone with a straight face look at that bullet train and say, you know, this project's been successful?
He'll tout it created 10,000 jobs in the Central Valley.
He thinks his policies regarding homelessness have been successful, too. And he gives himself credit over it.
He will constantly talk about how much money we have spent, how many programs we've created, how many nonprofits we've funded, but the problem has only gotten worse, and nobody knows where $25 billion went in 5 years.
But it's successful.
If you say it's a success, it's a success. You know what California government is? Fake it until you make it, baby.
And they're very good at that.
All right, let's hear what Bianco has to say on getting people to stop moving out of the state.
What can you do as governor?
We have to fix the things that are driving them out. They're driving them out because we pay far too much in taxes. We are not getting any benefit from those taxes. Our tax money is being wasted by our government. The regulations here for building, you can't afford a home here. It's impossible to buy a home. It's so sad that you have young couples that are trying to find friends to go in halves on to buy a house.
That's a terrible idea.
Oh, going in with a friend?
You want a friendship to end real quickly? Go in on a 30-year mortgage together.
Oh, that friendship is going to end in a 911 call.
Do you think they do the old Lucy and Ricky where they paint a line down the middle of the house?
Oh, yes. Although you might as well just buy the crime scene tape early because you're going to need more of it.
There's something seriously wrong with that system, and it's the government that's caused it. So the price of gas, the price of food, harming our farmers to put them out of business, which eventually drives the cost of food up for Californians. It absolutely makes no...
Wait, let's check again. Compare. You have Chad Bianco, who is running for governor.
Food up for Californians.
And you have Eleni.
For Californians.
She's going to have all the money.
Food up for Californians. It absolutely makes no sense. So if we fix those issues, then the people will come back.
Well, we know that there's a Democratic supermajority in Sacramento.
So if you fix all the problems in the state, people won't have to leave the state. That is ambitious.
Well, it's truthful, but right now we have a cadre of politicians who have no interest in fixing the problems. Right now, the only interest they have is spreading the spoils among themselves.
Well, we know that there's a Democratic supermajority in Sacramento, so how will you do that with that said legislature?
Yeah, so it's called leading. It's been decades and decades and decades since we have had a leader in Sacramento. It's easy to say we elected someone to a leadership position, but that does not make them a leader. You can't go in, number one, you have to care about other people more than yourself. And the thing that I've noticed in 6 years of having to deal with the people in Sacramento is it's all about them. It is not about...
Well, maybe you need to host some cocktail parties for them. They love those.
Well, and it's not even about them here. It's about them and their next job. Gavin Newsom wants to be president of the United States. If we get Kamala Harris, it's going to be a consolation prize because she couldn't be president of the United States. What do both of them have in common? They don't give a damn about California or California issues and problems.
It is not about Californians. It's not about our neighborhoods and our communities and constituents. It's about them. It's about their personal agenda, their ideological agenda, and it has to stop. So a true leader cares more about the people that they're serving than themselves, and they will sacrifice themselves. And I'm not saying that I'm that leader. Other people are telling me that I'm that leader.
Okay, that's a humble brag.
All right. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Chad Bianco, because he is the sheriff in the county that I live in. He is one of these rare people who has run against an incumbent and defeated them, who started out as the underdog and then became the incumbent himself. He ran against this guy who was the longtime sheriff of Riverside County, this guy named Stan Sniff, who was a real pain in the ass. He's a Republican who endorsed a bunch of Democrats and upset everyone. And so the union representing the deputy sheriffs was the one that got behind Bianco initially. And they were the ones that helped fund his race for sheriff. And he ran as a law and order Republican and ended up beating the incumbent by a wide margin. He won in a blowout. But that was an election where he had the money and he had the relevant endorsements. If he's going to win for governor, he's going to need money, but it's not the same as running countywide in Riverside. He's going to need money to the tune of $25-30 million to get out of the primary to succeed in a campaign for governor. And I don't necessarily see at this point how he gets that, unless the Silicon Valley guys come in big for him. People like Elon Musk and others, Peter Thiel. It's not going to happen. If Donald Trump gets behind him and gets behind him in a big way, then maybe some small dollar donors will open up their checkbooks for Chad Bianco. But raising $25 million is something that is a tall order. And when these people run for governor, they all say they can do it. They all say they have access to money. John Cox did that before. We had Brian Dahle, who was the Republican state senator who ran last time. They all say that they're going to be able to raise the money, and very few of them end up doing that. If you're going to be competitive in a state where the voter registration is heavily against you, you're going to need Meg Whitman-style money to be successful. How he can get that, I don't know. But maybe he has a benefactor. Maybe there's someone out there who has deep pockets who really wants this guy to win. That's happened before, where you have people on the sidelines who have just had enough, and they come in a big way, and that makes someone who otherwise would not be competitive. That's possible here, but that's what he's going to need.
So leadership is not something, I don't think it's something that you can learn. I think it's something that you could possibly be born with, or it's just natural to you. And so when my entire plan is to go there. You have to work with them, but there are also ground rules, and there's a mission and there's a vision, and you abide by that vision. And that's what leadership is that takes us from one step to the next.
He's bringing the smack down to Sacramento.
Just call him The Rock.
Okay, so we know a couple of things about California. We know it's very blue. We know that the last time we had a Republican governor was about 20 years ago. So to overcome that, you basically say it's not the D or the R in terms of your leadership. I want to ask you, though, because we have some statistics to show our viewers.
Boy, you think about that debate stage. Chad Bianco's phrase will be...
The D or the R.
Wait, it's going to be...
You basically say it's not the D or the R.
And Katie Porter's will be...
Little D.
That's going to be quite an event.
You basically say it's not the D or the R in terms of your leadership. I want to ask you, though, because we have some statistics to show our viewers. Kamala Harris, of course, our former vice president, she has not announced her gubernatorial run yet. But if she does, polls show you see it.
How about she goes on vacation?
I'm telling you, she may run for office just so when people look at her Wikipedia page years from now, they don't read, she ran for president, she lost, and that's the end of it. She may do it just as a resume builder.
Her gubernatorial run yet, but if she does, polls show, you see it here, that she has an overwhelming majority and that she would very well become the next governor of California. Do you want her to run? And if so, why?
I actually do.
Oh, that's great.
Well, here's a question that I have. Let's just look at this from the point of view of being a California Democrat. If you're a California Democrat and you are, let's say, in a union or in an industry that is Democrat dominated, and there are Democrat social networks that have access to Democratic politicians in this state, do you think you're going to have access to her, or do you think there's going to be 45 layers of people in between you and her? She's used to being vice president. She's used to being U.S. senator. She is up on a pedestal, and she doesn't have to deal with the people in the trenches. You think that's going to change if she becomes a candidate for governor or governor? All of these Democratic social networks that have access to all of these people in office are going to have that access shut down because she's too big for that. If you're a Democratic voter who wants to get the White House back, and you vote for Kamala Harris for governor, that's essentially the first primary for president, and you're voting for her. Do you really want her to be your nominee in 2028? Because if you do, guess what? You're going to lose again.
I actually do. And that poll, I believe it was only a Democrat poll, and it was of Democrat contenders. Who would you vote for?
Good for him for pointing that out.
Yeah, it's true.
I welcome that because I remember her as the Attorney General. She completely failed. It's a toss-up of who's worse, her or Attorney General Bonta. So the problems that she...
Well, we know who's a bigger bucket of cliches.
Well, it's been a while since you've seen her get interviewed, but she wasn't any better than him.
So the problems that she caused in San Francisco, what she did as the Attorney General, I welcome that competition, and especially in today's day and age of California when public safety is at the top of the list of issues, and to have to run against her I would welcome the opportunity to run against her because it would be a hands-down decision for voters who would they pick to lead California in that direction.
We have about 30 seconds left. Obviously, you're very well known here in Southern California. How do you get the name recognition that you have here statewide?
I think I have it. I think I have because of what's happened in the last 6 years. I think that it's obviously not as much here, but we still have it up north, and we found that in the last year as I traveled the state with Prop 36. So I think we've done that very well with that.
There you go. Chad Bianco running for governor, the sheriff of Riverside, going statewide.
What's interesting is if Kamala gets in the race, she's just going to ignore all of these subjects that we talk about because she hasn't thought much about them. She doesn't really care about them. Why are you bothering me with questions about insurance or crime or homelessness or the state budget? If she runs for governor, that campaign is going to be all about Donald Trump, abortion, and climate change. And none of the subjects that are actually pressing right now in the state are going to get any attention at all.
Well, that's how Gavin ran, and he kept winning.
That's true. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, now that we've hit the halfway point of today's show, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is go to KABC.com, click on podcast, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. Do a Google on them YouTubes or get that handy-dandy KABC app. Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store, the Android Store. It's the easiest way to listen live to this radio station, download all the podcasts. Maybe you want to download last hour's podcast and listen to this part on a loop.
In retrospect, that trip was a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no question about that.
It is a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. You can follow him on X at The Armed Liberal himself, Mr. Marc Danziger. Welcome.
Thank you, John. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us on this Tuesday that feels like a Monday.
Well, it's been sort of an interesting month. I'm kind of dying to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, let's start out with the interview that happened over the weekend on Conan Nolan's program on KNBC, where he interviewed the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, where for the first time she acknowledged that it was a mistake to go to Africa for the inauguration of the president of Ghana instead of sticking around Los Angeles after she was told that there would be extreme winds and fire risk. Here's what she had to say.
In retrospect, that trip was a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. There is no question about that.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm wearing headphones, so I can't bash my head against the wall without, it sounding uniquely horrible. But I do want to publicly eat a large helping of crow, probably served on Navajo fry bread, given the recent week, over the fact that I thought that Bass would be a better selection for VP than Harris was. I think that she is kind of failing as a mayor pretty strongly, and that what I hoped would happen, which is that she would be able to pull together people across the aisle and actually focus on governance and on getting stuff done in the city, kind of got washed away by her desire to go to Ghana and hang out for the inauguration of the new president there.
My theory on why she went to Ghana and didn't stick around is that she is angry that she's not the vice president, that she got a consolation prize and is mayor of Los Angeles because Kamala Harris took the job that was meant for her. And if you're vice president, one of the things that you do is you travel around the globe doing diplomatic things. You attend inaugurations, you attend weddings, you attend funerals. It can be a largely ceremonial role if that's what the president wants. And I think that that's what she was looking for. I think that's what she wants to do with her time. As a longtime member of Congress, many of these members travel around the globe on these members' trips where they do things that are very similar to that. And that's what she had been spending her time doing. She was not in municipal government. She was in the United States Congress and before that, the state legislature. I think that that's what she would prefer to be doing with her time and not staying in Los Angeles running the city.
So I think you're right, but let me generalize from that and take it up a level, which is I think that most of our politicians today aren't very focused on the work of politics, which is delivering the goods. And that they're very much focused on what I'll call the theater of politics, which is I go to meetings, people take pictures of me shaking hands, I look important, I give kind of semi-meaningful talks in public, and I eat great food and faded wherever I go. And the problem is that in today's world, in America, as we live it today, there is so much actual grinding, boring, plumbing work that has to get done. And there are so few politicians who seem to actually enjoy doing it.
Why is it, you think, that they all aspire to become a lieutenant governor, where you have a title, you have a staff, you have a salary, but you have no actual duties?
Well, you're not accountable for anything. There's no risk, right? Because anytime you're actually accountable for something, your neck is a little bit on the line. You're saying, I will make the fire department work. I will make sure there's water in the fire hydrants. I will make sure that the sewage treatment plant doesn't overflow. I will do the things that keep us all alive. And when those things don't work, people look at you and they're like, hey, you're not doing your job. Whereas if my job is ceremonial, I went to a conference, I gave a talk, I wrote a PowerPoint, I shook a lot of hands. It's hard to be judged on that.
We're speaking with Marc Danziger, the armed liberal, who you can follow on X at the armed liberal. Speaking of people who enjoy those duties, the former vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris, is leading in the most recent polls in terms of who, at least California Democrats, would select to be the next governor of California. And the race isn't even close. In fact, California Attorney General Rob Bonta announced that he would be running for re-election as Attorney General. When asked by Politico why he made that decision after he'd been telling people privately that he was going to run for governor, he said he thinks Kamala is in and the field is going to be cleared and she's going to cakewalk into that office. What do you make of that scenario?
I think it's a perfect symbol of the utter collapse of the Democratic Party as a functional institution. I think that a Democratic Party that wanted to regain power in the country would be looking very, very hard at how can we bring somebody to the table that actually gets stuff done? How can we bring somebody to the table who actually is going to accomplish some of these goals that we set out for government for ourselves? How do we bring somebody to the table who's not going to replay the same old divisive kind of politics that we've seen for the last 8 years? And instead, they're kind of doing what they failed to do before, but they're just doing it harder and assuming it's somehow going to work better. I don't get it.
What would be the motivation for her to run for governor of California? The way I see it, there's two potential answers to that question. Maybe you see a third or a fourth. One of the potential answers is that she's looking at her overall portfolio and she says to herself, I do not want the final chapter to be ran for president after Joe dropped out at the last minute and lost. But if I run for governor of California, it doesn't matter what kind of job I do, as long as I have another title for something that looks important on paper, then when people read about me on Wikipedia 100 years from now, it's going to look like I bounced back and did something of consequence. The other option I see is that she wants to keep herself relevant and keep herself in the news and keep herself booked on the cable news chat shows so she can turn around and run for president again in 2028 if she thinks the reason that she lost was that she had an abbreviated campaign because Joe stayed in too long. Which one do you think it is?
I think it's 100% the second one. I think that, by all accounts, she is a person with a temper. She is a person who, for most of her career, has kind of sought to be close to the limelight. And she got to step into the light and in a not great situation and didn't, I think, do a great job. But from her point of view, it's like, put me back in, coach. I can do better next time. And it's, again, here's what's terrifying to me as a very loosely held Democrat. Who's going to run against her for president? Like, somebody who's going to run for president in 2028 is already on stage somewhere. Who is the person who's going to run? Who is going to be able to turn the Democratic ship around? I don't see anybody. And I can name 3 or 4 people on the Republican side who would be plausible candidates for president and who would reasonably do well. I think DeSantis would probably do better in a normal campaign, not against Trump. I think Vance is surprisingly, kind of articulate and good. I think that there's a couple of people on that side of the table that appear to have their act together and would be in a place to start running in 2 years. But on the Democratic side, who's there? And it's the Democratic Party's in deep, deep, deep crisis, and nobody wants to really admit it. And it's terrifying to me because when the Democrats were dominating with Obama, I was like, hey, we need a strong Republican Party because we got to have both wings on the plane to fly. We need the same to be true for Democrats. And there's nobody at a national senior level who seems to be saying, hey, guys, we walked down a dead end. We need to turn around and revisit where we're going. And we have to do it with seriousness and with energy, and we have to do it quickly.
If you're a Democratic voter in California and you're voting in the gubernatorial election in 2026, should you regard this election as essentially being the first primary for president in 2028? Because if you select this woman to be governor of California, you're essentially nominating her to be the front runner in your primary for president.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there are bigger issues in terms of her running, and I think that there are going to be some. I see some icebergs on the horizon for California and for Illinois and a couple other states. But absolutely, I think that you're validating that you think that she's a plausible national candidate and that you think it would be okay if she ran again. And I think, again, horrible idea. But it's going to be interesting because if she does run again, California and many of the cities in California is broke. And, if you look at the finances, they are and have been for some time an utter train wreck. And right now, Newsom might, we have the collapse of the insurance industry in California. Fair Plan is going to demand $1 billion from all the existing insurers and the people who they insure over the next year or so. That's not nearly enough to cover the cost of the fire. We have an energy system that's collapsing. Newsom is talking about wanting to take over refineries and have the state of California purchase and operate an oil refinery, which ought to terrify all of us. So the state is utterly broke. And if Harris had won, my guess is there'd be a large flow of cash from the federal government to the state of California. It ain't happening. It's not going to happen under Trump. And no one in California is acting like, oh, wow, we kind of thought that mom and dad were going to die and leave us all this money and we could afford our lifestyle, and now they're not going to, and maybe we need to do something different. So Harris stepping into that office is not going to be a piece of cake, and she's going to be walking into an absolute hurricane of trouble.
Well, what's going to happen to the state of California? Let's just assume, and I'm making this up, but I bet you I'm right, that she runs on the platform of we need the state of California to have a first female governor. We need someone who's willing to stand up to Donald Trump on a daily basis and go on all the cable shows and rebut whatever it is that he's trying to do. And we need someone who's committed to legalized abortion, which is already the case in California. Fine. If that's the platform that she runs on, that's worked for her in the past. But to the issues that you just brought up, that doesn't mean we're going to have a conversation about what to do about the insurance crisis. That means we're not going to have a conversation about our budgetary problems. That means we're not going to have a conversation about crime or homelessness or the bullet train or any of the other issues that the state's facing right now that we need answers on. We're going to go through another cycle where our actual problems are totally ignored.
Yeah, completely. It's going to be. They'll have try and nationalize the election here in California, and in doing that, what they're going to do is whistle past the problems of real Californians. I don't think that can work. I think that the bills are due on that, and that they are no longer going to be able to make that happen because next year Californians are going to face a 20 to 50% increase in their real property insurance. Next year, we're going to see another refinery probably go offline. which means that gas prices in California, which has its own gas prices because they have their own special kind of gas, right, special fuel, right, are going to continue to escalate as they probably fall in the rest of the nation. You're going to see more companies like Chevron move out of California and just say, look, we're happy to see the vacuum. So I think at some point, California voters are going to demand that their government start dealing with their problems. And nominating and electing Harris is not a path to doing that in any world that I can imagine.
Last question before you go. The remaining dominant industry in California that isn't going anywhere is Silicon Valley. For the first time at the national level, we've seen some of the bold-faced names really get involved. They came behind Donald Trump in a real and serious way, and they are involved in his administration in trying to reform the way the government operates. They have been hesitant to do that at the state level, but if and when they ever decide to play, they would certainly change the dynamic of the game. In the old days, Southern Pacific and the railroads controlled state government in California. They were the ones that spent the money. At one point, their CEO, Leland Stanford, was the governor of California, and their chief counsel was in charge of the California Supreme Court. I mean, they really own things here. At what point does Silicon Valley start to operate like the railroads and say, we can't operate our businesses in a failed state, and we're just going to take over?
The interesting question in that, so my older two kids are both in tech in the Bay Area, and they're far enough up the food chain because I'm old and they're old, that they have some visibility into the larger issues. And we have this debate all the time, which is, does tech try and fix California, or does tech just leave? And there's a real interesting debate, right? Because what you see in the tech industry was 8 years ago, Elon Musk was a liberal. He was a liberal darling. He was building electric cars. He was putting solar on the roofs of homes. He was building rockets. He was the model of what people wanted to see in the future, right? There was, I think, the only conservative tech guy I can think of back then would have been Peter Thiel. And today, you see this massive split where even Zuckerberg is starting to act with the word based. And you're seeing all of these tech guys sort of pivoting to the right. And the question will be, literally, are they going to turn around and invest in rebuilding California? Or are they going to simply say, Texas isn't so bad. We could all move to Texas or someplace like that. And my bet will be that if a smart Democratic politician came along, the first thing they would be doing is doing trips to Silicon Valley with a bended knee and saying, hey, how do we get you guys to step in and help fix the state? How do you help save us? Because I don't know who else is powerful enough to make that happen anymore.
Marc Danziger, The Armed Liberal. You can follow him on X at The Armed Liberal. Marc, thanks so much for stopping by. Always appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. You take care.